Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 bread and butter Ark Tames. So without further ado, let's get straight into this. In at number 10 we have got the Carnotaurus, and for me this is a very bread and butter creature. It is almost a no-brainer for taming one of these things, and it may not be the same for you, but I do kind of come from a more, let's say, older time of playing Ark, and obviously because I've played the game for a while, I tend to like a lot of the creatures which are introduced a lot earlier on in the game, and I really did use the Carno a lot back in the day, and I still hold it up to a very high standard these days, obviously, and that is why I put it on this list, because I can't really imagine, like, my brain doesn't really work properly if I don't tame a Carno in all of my playthroughs when there's obviously Carnos on the map. It's just instinctively, I need to go and tame those Carnos, and some people probably aren't like that. Actually, quite a lot of people aren't like that, but from my personal experience and my personal taste, I really do just like, I need one of these creatures, and that may be the same for you. And also, if you did watch Squid's playthrough of Ark stuff back in the day, then you know he used Carnos a lot as well, and that really did build my reputation even more for the Carno, to see that popular YouTubers at the time obviously were using these Carnos for all their stuff, and it just reinforced my use for them. And still to this day I use these things to bits, and now they do also deal the bleed ability, which is, you know, just a really helpful thing to have, and obviously for you to use, because you can deal even more damage, and the mobility is really decent. Their health is pretty good as well, same as their stamina. It's not like maybe the best in the world, but it will definitely get you by. Their weight is a little bit lower than what I remember it being, but that really doesn't matter too much for a creature like this. Next up, we have got the Pteranodon, and this is like pretty much everyone's first flyer in the game. It makes sense to put this thing here, as it's just, it kind of forms quite an essential part of a lot of people's Ark playing, and you know, for that it definitely does deserve to be on the list. For those reasons, it is an extremely useful creature because its shadow is unlocked so early on, and you get yourself a pretty fast, efficient, speedy flyer, capable of doing some raids in the early game as well with that spin attack. The only real downsides being obviously their really low stamina and not great weight either, but you know, if you do tame a high enough level, that can be quite easily avoided, and obviously you can just level them up as well, which will vastly improve your experience with these things. The only real difficulty you'll probably have if you're taming one of these for the first time isn't really the taming, because it is simply done with the Bolans and Trancos. It's just, you know, getting all that necessary chitin or keratin. I would definitely recommend using chitin. Can take quite a bit, especially if you're playing on official server, because you need 75 of the stuff. The hide and the fiber at level 38 really shouldn't be that bad, because you will have creatures which are able to get that for you. Yes, that may be your only real difficulty with it, but it is definitely well worth it, and universally people use these things all the time, and it is really truly a great creature, and it's definitely one you should be getting into if you haven't got into one already. And if you haven't even played Ark yet, and if you're just starting out even, this is definitely a creature which you want to be aiming for. Next up we have got the Theri, and the reason it's here isn't just because its shadow was unlocked at level 69.
Nice.
It is because this thing is such a great berry gatherer of all kinds of resources, including things like fiber, berry, wood, thatch, hide and meat, keratin, chitin. Those resources you can gather just the lot with this creature. Also, its saddle is unlocked relatively early, considering the use you can get out of this creature. Obviously level 69, nice, is still quite late on into the game. It still is pretty early compared to some other options which would give you the same level, which actually, in all fairness, there pretty much isn't any. Like, obviously you have the moss shots for doing loads of fiber gathering, but it can't compare to the amount you can gather with this thing. It's got its little tickle fingers. It can really get in there and do all of what it needs to do. But also, this thing is a very good contender, and it should be a great contender on your list for doing the dragon boss fight, as it is particularly harsh to carnivores, and obviously this isn't a carnivore, so you can avoid all of that, and the Theri deals a ton of damage. You can probably tell considering how large the claws on this thing actually are, and your only real downside to doing it this way instead of using traditional carnivores is that sweet vegetable cake, which you'll need to heal them up quickly and efficiently. can be quite a strain to actually get because they're quite expensive compared to just normal meat, which is very easy to gather, but if you have a Daedon, you should be alright. Next up, we have got the Thyla in at the number 7 spot, and this creature is so universally used across the island for its amazing travel and damage capabilities. It spawns in the redwoods on pretty much any map, but it definitely does spawn quite a lot in the redwoods biome on the island, so it is definitely a very good choice for beginner Ark players and Ark players which are just playing on their first map, and also people that are new to ASA as well, as the island is the first map you'll get and is the most accessible one to all Ark players out there. So it really is a no-brainer to get one of these things, and I know the redwoods can be quite a difficult terrain to traverse, especially in the early stages, but if you take your precautions seriously and you look around your environment while getting through, and you do bring some sort of suitable protection in case of an emergency happening and you being in quite a grave state of danger, then you should be really fine. The tranking of this thing is easy as long as you have it trapped, and then you have yourself an extremely great carnivore capable of dealing tons of damage, and the bleed ability on top of that as well. They can also scale any kind of wall or vertical surface like you've been seeing throughout this B-roll. And the sad thing is with ASA's terrain, they do get a little bit stuck in a lot of places, but pretty much every creature does, so you know, I wouldn't worry too much, but it just can be a little bit of a hindrance if you are playing in ASA, so maybe don't go up some of those steeper mountains with this thing, or if you do, then be aware that you might get stuck in some places. Also, you can see that bleed ability here being dealt onto a Kentro, which obviously they do deal damage back, but still you're going to be dealing tons of damage into that thing, and very quickly this thing is completely decimated. That's why the bleed ability is so good, because it works on a percentage based scale instead of just a raw damage scale. So yes, the Thyla is definitely a big contender, and you should be taming one if you have the map to tame one, which everyone kind of does. It's on the island and you're at the right level to actually do so. Next up, we have got the Desmodus, and this creature's sanguine elixir makes it really a no-brainer bread and butter creature for me. I will just go onto Fielder, get myself one of these Desmoduses, and then just transfer it onto the island or whatever other map I might be playing on. In the moment, I'm playing a lot of Gen 1 because I finished off Extinction and I'm going to Gen 1. I've done all these before, but I'm just replaying through them because I feel like it. Again, not really playing too much ASA, although I have got an FSR3 mod running on that, so it does run at quite a nice 60 now, but still, I'm just kind of waiting for some other maps to come out, and I probably will play the center when that thing releases, but I'm going to try and get Gen 1 done first. Either way, Desmodus makes Sanguine Elixir, is a blood bag farm, has the gliding ability, meaning it's a really fast, speedy fly, can go invisible in the night as well. Couldn't show that because I was in the wastelands biome. Bit of a numpty there. It can also grapple onto any kind of wall or ceiling like the Tapijara can. Just make sure not to dismount when you do this, because I know someone out there has accidentally done that, and I've done that as well. Just always remember to do the jump button and not the dismount button, because you know you're always going to get issues with things like that. In at number 5, we have got the Rex, and this creature is here just because it is one of those bread and butter essential tames. They spawn on the island and most maps. They also do have an X variant on Gen 1, which provides even better performance out of this creature. They are very big, hunking beasts, but despite that, they are ridiculously easy to tame, especially on ASA with that new baby mechanic. Otherwise, they're just a very simple knockout tame. Just get maybe a 2x2 or a 3x3 stone trap with some ramps on, walk it into it, and then simply knock it out and feed it your preferred taming food. Probably either prime meat, mutton, or the kibble required to do the Rex. Can't remember the kibble system, honestly, because I really use none of it, and some people might be a little bit triggered by that in the comments, but really, I can't be all fast with kibble, and I will just use things like mutton instead. I don't really care too much about the 100% effectiveness or all of the faster taming. I can wait, it's fine. I do have some buffed rates anyway, so I'm not going to be waiting absolutely ages for any sort of tame. Obviously, once you do have the Rex tamed, you've got yourself a immense boss crushing beast with great health stats, a great amount of damage, is lacking in the mobility side of things, but you don't really need that in combat, and their saddles are relatively cheap as well, and very easy to get on ASA as they're in drops all over the place, and you can very easily get these things even like before you even get a Pteranodon, because if you get like something like a Bronto to kill off the parent Rex, then you can simply just press E on that baby Rex and boom, you've got yourself a Rex, and as long as you're not playing on official, that thing will raise up pretty quick and nicely. Next up, we have got the Deinonychus, and this creature is here because it can do so much. It deals bleed damage to bosses, it travels at an insanely ripping speed, and it can do all kinds of cool parkour maneuvers, and I really do have to thank this tame for being in the game, as the amount of progress I've made with this creature throughout my Ark playing is insane, and I can't really imagine a world of Ark without this creature. Quite a lot of people are like that with the Shadowmane as well, but I find I'm not too miffed with that creature. I go occasionally through some phases of liking that creature. I still definitely do like that creature, don't get me wrong, but I find the taming of it just a whole lot of laborious nonsense, which I really don't want to get involved with. But once I do have them, I really do enjoy them and use them a lot. Just the Deinonychus is a much easier tame, and for me just a better creature. Although maybe it doesn't quite have the mobility of the Shadowmane, especially underwater. This thing doesn't take full damage, it has the pack buff like the Shadowmane, and it deals bleed damage to bosses, which the Shadowmane does not do, and as far as I'm concerned, no other Ark creature actually does this. So it gives it a huge edge, and obviously their attack speed is ridiculously fast as well, so they can really ravage bosses to shreds. And like I was saying before, they can parkour up any kind of wall or vertical surface. They really don't struggle with this whatsoever. It does take a little bit of learning because it's a less elegant solution than something like the Thyla, where it just walks up, the same as the Rock Drake, they do that. But you know, after you've just spent a little bit of getting used to, at least that's what it was like for me, this really is just a perfect creature, and I would definitely recommend you get one of these things. In at number 3, we have got the Bloodstalker, and for me, this is my go-to ocean creature, no questions asked, and exploring the ocean, doing underwater caves and all that stuff is quite a big part of my Ark playing, especially considering I'm doing a lot of Gen 1 at the moment. The ocean biome is quite prevalent throughout that, and obviously just traveling on this thing is pretty much like essential. It's essential to travel around in Ark, and on Gen 1 this is kind of your only option. But just on a broader term, across all maps, you can really get tons of use out of this creature for underwater use. Essentially, you can go underwater with this thing, you can skim across the top, and you can travel with such speed, and you can see the aggros of all the creatures as well. It is so helpful to have this, and I've been using the Bloodstalker for absolutely ages now. It's not just I'm Gen 1 biased because I'm playing a lot of Gen 1 at the moment. No, I've been using these things across all of Ark's maps. Maybe not Arboration, but you know, it's always finicky transferring things onto Arboration, so I don't really tend to mess with that map. But still, across loads of maps, it really is a hugely successful creature, and on Gen 1 and Gen 2 you can get so much more out of it as well, in terms of gathering hexagons as well. Those maps are slightly more designed around this creature as well, but still, with that underwater travel, any underwater scenario really does suit this creature, especially caving I found, as you can quickly get into there and get out with no problems whatsoever, because you can really just travel at a rapid pace, and you're so small, nothing really is going to hit you. So it is a no-brainer for me to get myself a Bloodstalker, and that is why it has made it all the way up into the number 3 spot of this list. Now, this is what my classical side will show, with the number 2 spot being the Baryonyx, because I just essentially need this thing to do caves. I won't really use any other creature. I've used creatures like the Shadowmane and the Deinonychus and things like that, but I always come back to this creature. It's probably some kind of weird placebo, but for me it just does everything I need it to, and it works in such a way that I wouldn't want any other creature, no matter how OP, to do any of my caving needs. This just suits them so well, and it can do the underwater caves quite nicely as well, although that is where I would use a Bloodstalker usually to step in, as that thing is just so good for the underwater caves. But all the land caves, I will definitely get one of these things and then just plow through all of them, apart from on the islands, the artifact of the Skylords, because you know, you can't really fit any decently sized creature into that unless you want to take a dung beetle with you, I guess. But obviously they still can be extremely useful in the underwater caves as well. I did used to use them a lot. That spin attack does come in real handy, just, you know, the Bloodstalker's overtaken it in that aspect for me. And people nowadays will be using creatures like the Shadowmane to do that, and that is definitely a very viable creature. But for me, the bread and butter, the basic one that everyone really should have is the Baryonyx, and that is why it is in at the number 2 spot. And in at number 1, we have got the RG, and this is just the most bread and butter tame out there for me. It is the basic, it is the essential Argentavis. I cannot imagine an Ark playthrough or an Ark world without this creature being in it, which is why I always chuck it in the number 1 spot for any of these lists. Firstly, it spawns on the island, therefore it is an extremely accessible tame for all players out there. It is a very easy tame, which can just be tamed with 2 wooden foundations, 2 wooden ceilings, then that would make, do the maths on that thing, 8, 10 wooden door frames, just some train carriers and a bow, and obviously there's sewing materials to make the saddle, and boom, you have yourself a perfectly tamed RG. You don't even need the trap, it just makes it significantly easier, and also having a Pteranodon at your disposal as well will make it easier because it's easier to aggro it over. But depending on your setting, it may already be on the ground, and it's a very easy grab. And once you've got that, once paired with something like an Anki and a Dodic, you can farm tons of metal with it, especially considering its weight reduction on things like metal, crystal and obsidian. Its saddle also acts as a portable smithy, so if you're out anywhere and any of your metal tools or armor breaks, you can always quickly repair it on the RG, as long as you do have some spare metal ingots in its inventory, which won't really be a worry as its weight is tremendously high, and also its stamina is decent enough to go over long distances. Also, if you kill any creatures, eat their dead bodies, you can have a nice neat little regen buff, and you can carry an extra small creature in its mouth. Just do with those abilities as you please, I guess. In at number 10 is the Chalicotherium, and this creature really does get a bad rep, and its tame method is definitely an interesting one, you having to feed this thing beer. But all of that aside, this is actually a really great creature for dealing melee damage, as it is a pretty powerful creature, and its knockback on some of the smaller creatures which you'll find on Ark is absolutely insane. And that knockback is still a very useful ability to have for any creature, and obviously it can throw its rocks around as well. And little creatures actually have a long range ability attached to them, so it is really a convenience that this does have it. And yes, it will probably take some time to learn to actually control this, as it cannot be the easiest to aim. Once you get it right, you have yourself a really good fighting carnivore with some long range abilities, and it really shouldn't be left out of the general mix of what you should be taming. Yes, it's not going to be the best creature out there, but it still will be very worth your while. Next up, we have the Achatina. And this is actually a really great creature for farming cementing paste, as they literally create it, and that pretty much is their only use. The taming method is also very simple, just requiring some sweet vegetable cake, which isn't the most expensive thing, and considering how much cementing paste you can get out of these things, it is definitely worth it. All for that cementing paste, of course, as that is basically the only reason for getting these things. Now, the Mosasaurus isn't my favourite Ark tame, of course, which is why it's on this list. These are kind of mediocre to not really mediocre, no, better than mediocre. The Mosasaurus is a good tame. I will definitely say that. It's not my favourites out there. I'll definitely say the Basilosaurus is a much better ocean tame, but this is good tames, not like the best tames. So that's why the Mosasaurus is here. Sorry for my rubbish explanation of it, but essentially this is an underwater creature which is going to pack a lot of damage, and with the X versions on Gen 1 you can have yourself an even better time, and you can even craft a platform saddle for this thing and build a base on the back of it if that's your thing as well. It's just I don't really use the Mosa that much, and when I use it, yes, I definitely enjoy it, but I don't really get any kind of connection through it. Now, the anglerfish is definitely a creature which I think at some point you should tame, and it definitely is worth it for all of that silica pearl farming. I don't know why I couldn't say silica pearl there, but yes, this is the ultimate silica pearl farmer. You don't even need to get off the back of this thing to farm it. You can just, I can't remember what you do. It's like attacking. I haven't used this thing in a couple of weeks now, so my mind is oddly ill refreshed. as yes, this isn't the most memorable creature, but it definitely is one which if you get into using, you'll use a lot. It's just I'm playing Extinction at the moment, and you know, these things really aren't going to be any help on Extinction. There's not really any kind of ocean on that map. But yes, if you're in a pinch and you need some silica pearls, the angler is a great shout for a creature. If you haven't tamed one already, definitely tame one. And if you just want to farm some angler gel, that is a great use out of these things as well. If you kill them, you can get angler gel, you can put it in torches, and it has many other uses as well. Now, the Bronto is one of these tames which just has to be mentioned on the list. This creature is one which, albeit, as obviously this list goes, isn't going to be the creature which is going to absolutely change your game and just be the most insane creature you have ever set eyes upon. But it is still a very good harvester of berries, and it even has a platform saddle too, where you can build a base if that's your thing, again, like the Mosa. And it does actually deal a reasonable amount of damage, although it probably will take some time. But I did manage to kill that chalk golem. I think they are chalk golems on Vaguero. Not sure. Educate me if I got that wrong. Comment down below. What are they called? Because I'm not actually quite sure. Yes, the Bronto does lack in mobility, but considering the length of its tail and how many bushes it can gather, this is a really, really great creature, which if you haven't tamed already, definitely give it a try. In at number 5 is the Rock Golem. And this thing is a really great tame, I will admit, but not one which I am absolutely crazy about. And its tame method is a one of huge annoyance, which somewhat does actually deter me from taming this creature, as I really don't want to get out the cannons and a parasaur, because that's the method that I use, or even a rocket launcher and do it that way, as that method is particularly risky. But once I do have one, I do find that I do use it quite a lot for killing deathworms on scorched earth, and is obviously really, really great at doing that. But still, overall, I don't have the greatest fun when using this creature, as it isn't the most mobile out there. I do prefer a more quick and snappy creature over something like this, but I could definitely see if I was more of a PvP player, I'd be loving this thing and I'd be taming it a heck of a lot more. Just for me, it's one of those mediocre tames which really I don't need as a PvE player, but it is still fun to tame a couple of times and just on general occasions. Now we have the Astrocetus, and this creature is definitely one which I'll use from time to time, but its taming method is one which I really just can't get round. But it is definitely one of those creatures which I prefer using than the Golem, and obviously as this list goes on, these are creatures which I prefer more and more, if you haven't figured that out already. So the creature in number 1 is the best of the good creatures, and this is actually just some good fun for transporting things around and just for some general sky combat as well, although this more fits into the PvP space of Ark players. So for me, a PvE Ark player, this isn't going to be the most useful creature to me, but I can still see all of its very valuable use cases in PvP scenarios, and still it is some really good fun to ride around on, mess around with, and deal some heavy damage on creatures with. A good tame. Now, I'm not really an Astrodelphis lover. I don't absolutely crave this creature, but I'll definitely admit it is a good one, and in my opinion, better than the Astrocetus, at least for my use case, as having a fast travel creature is definitely a really good thing to have. It's just I vastly prefer the Rhyniognatha if I'm going to use a creature like this which can travel around the map with great speeds, or I will use the Maywing and I will alternate between those two creatures. And I don't really use this thing as its saddle level is too high, and I usually don't really get to that level, although I have on Gen 2. It just is a little bit too much effort for me to actually get one of these things, and the taming method is albeit quite simple, and I do have a guide on it, although not the best as in my YouTube past, which I don't look too fondly upon, but you know, it's still there if you did want to check it out. It isn't actually the simplest of tame methods, and a lot of things can go wrong with it. Whereas the Rhyniognatha, it is pretty straightforward overall, and yes, not the easiest again, like a simple knockout tame. It definitely is a pretty basic one in my opinion, and I have no trouble with it. But I can definitely agree the Astrodelphis is a great creature, and if you tame one, you're going to have a good time with it. They are just that kind of creature. They are really speedy, fast, and hugely agile. And in at number 2 is the Rhyniognatha. And again, this is a creature which, albeit, I can see great use in. And I have used a little bit. I just can't love this creature. And I'm not the biggest fan of it in my opinion. Obviously, that would be my opinion. But I can still see its use case. Just to me, I don't really need this creature for everything. I can make do with some other creatures to transport things around, and yes, the ability to carry Rexes around is useful. I can always just use cryopods or obviously the Soul Traps mod to transport those creatures around, and I don't need a creature which can carry those types of creatures. And the tame method is a very long and lengthy process, and on the old version of Ark, these things are extremely rare, making the taming method even harder than it already needs to be. Whereas in ASA, these things just spawn absolutely crazily. They are everywhere in the swamp biomes on the island. It's insane. And obviously the Lost Island isn't in ASA at the moment, so the island's going to be your only bet. But if you do want to tame one, you have to kill a male Rhyniognatha to start and take out that pheromone gland, which will be in their inventory. Tame a Bronto or another creature, which it will accept, and get all those resources, which were on screen about 5 seconds ago. The Bronto is advised, and those resources aren't actually needed, only needed for 100% effectiveness. Then you'll want to trap it or net gun it. Net gunning it is much easier. Pull out a magnifying glass or use the awesome spyglass like I'm using here if you have access to it, obviously. Otherwise, the magnifying glass is your best bet, or you might be able to use the tech binoculars too. And then you want to damage it as much as you can, obviously without killing it. Get its health as low as you can. Obviously, you don't want to kill this thing. That would be really bad, and then you just have to wait for this thing to get out. But before it does, or obviously if you're using a normal trap, you're just going to have to open the trap, feed that pheromone gland to your creature, and then wait outside until, or actually wait from a safe distance, sorry, and then you might just damage it more if it's needed, and then it will impregnate your dino. That's when those resources are needed in the kind of craving timers. Then at the end of that, your creature will fall over and out will come a baby Rhyniognatha. A lengthy process, but actually quite worth it sometimes. And finally, in at number 1 is the Allosaurus. And this creature, most people will disagree with me by putting this in at the number 1 slot for good tames. It is my favourite tame which I classify as good, but I can't put it into the very good category, as for some reason I just can't like this creature, and I don't know why. I've tried so many times to like this creature, but I just don't like the size of it and all of it. I don't even like the taming method, which is so simple. I don't like the pack separation bit, which isn't even necessary. You can just tame all 3. It's so simple, and I don't really know why. I just can't like this creature, but I just can't really like this creature for whatever reason. And I can admit that it is a really good tame, but for me, it just stays in the good category. And even though it has the bleed ability, good mobility, it has good stamina, good damage, and good health, I don't know. Like I've said so many times, I just really struggle using this thing for some reason. I don't know. I guess I'm just allo incapable or something. But I'll always go with a Carno, and then if I want to go big scale, I'll go with a UT, and I won't go with this creature. I don't know why. I'll go with the UT, and I'll just skip the Allo entirely, and maybe I'll go for a Rex, although I probably won't travel around with that thing as it's not great, and then maybe I'll use the Megalosaurus or the Baryonyx, some much better carnivores in my opinion than the Allo. And it's kind of sad that I don't really like it as much as I thought I would when obviously I was first using the Allo, but I've just never really enjoyed using this creature, and that's just the fact of that. And creatures like the Deinonychus, the Shadowmane, the Baryonyx, the Megalosaurus, the Rex, the UT, the Carno are all creatures which I vastly prefer from the Allo, and that is probably just the way that it's always going to be. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you enjoyed this one, as I did enjoy making it. And comment down below, what is your favourite good tame, and do you actually like the Allo, or you like me? And I'll see you all later.